October 20th, 1944. 10:15 hours. Red Beach, Leyte Gulf, the Philippines. The air, thick with salt spray and the smell of cordite, was torn apart by a staccato rhythm unlike any the Japanese Imperial Army had ever encountered. It was not the measured, deliberate report of single shots, but a continuous, hammering cascade of semi-automatic fire. This was a new, terrifying symphony of industrial warfare, a sound that signaled a fundamental shift in the very nature of infantry combat. While a Japanese soldier was still working the bolt of his rifle to chamber a single new round, an American infantryman could fire 8 times with aimed accuracy, without ever breaking his stance or his line of sight. This was not merely an incremental improvement, it was a quantum leap in battlefield technology. The instrument of this revolution was the U.S. rifle caliber .30 M1, commonly known as the Garand, and on this day, it would brutally validate General George S. Patton's later description of it as the greatest battle implement ever devised. The Japanese defenders, armed with their dependable but antiquated bolt-action Arisaka Type 38 and Type 99 rifles, were poised to learn a devastating lesson in the fatal cost of bringing 19th century weaponry to a 20th century firefight. This transformation of American infantry capabilities was not a sudden wartime improvisation. Its roots stretched back more than a decade before the attack on Pearl Harbor, to the quiet, methodical work at the Springfield Armory in Massachusetts. The weapon that would redefine the arithmetic of the battlefield was born from a singular, powerful insight. In the chaos of modern combat, the soldier who could deliver more accurate rounds, faster, would hold an unassailable advantage. This concept, simple in theory, had proven maddeningly difficult in practice. The man who would solve this puzzle was John Cantius Garand, a Canadian-born designer whose name would become synonymous with American firepower. For years, Garand labored to achieve what military experts across the globe considered a near impossibility: a self-loading rifle that was reliable enough for the mud, sand, and grit of frontline service, accurate enough to be effective at combat ranges, and simple enough to be manufactured by the millions and maintained by conscript soldiers in the field. The history of military semi-automatics was a graveyard of promising but flawed designs. The French RSC 1917, the Mexican Mondragon, and the American Pedersen rifle all had proven too complex, too fragile, or too finicky for the brutal realities of war. They were technological curiosities, not battle-ready tools. Garand's genius, finalized in his 1932 design and officially adopted by the U.S. Army on January 9, 1936, lay in his elegant and robust solution. The M1 Garand operated on a gas-operated rotating bolt system. When a round was fired, a small portion of the propellant gases was siphoned off through a port in the barrel. This gas drove a piston, which in turn cycled the entire action, ejecting the spent brass, compressing the return spring, stripping a fresh round from the end-block clip, chambering it, and locking the bolt, all in the blink of an eye. The soldier's only tasks were to aim, fire, and reload. The official Ordnance Department specifications detailed a weapon of remarkable capability. The M1 weighed 9.5 pounds unloaded, with an overall length of 43.6 inches. It fired the powerful .30-06 Springfield cartridge, a round respected for its long range and stopping power. Its effective range extended to 500 yards, with accuracy that matched or exceeded any contemporary bolt-action rifle. But the true revolution was in its rate of sustained fire. A trained soldier could unleash 40 to 50 aimed rounds per minute, a rate that dwarfed the 10 to 15 rounds per minute achievable by even the most proficient bolt-action riflemen. The M1's internal magazine was fed by an 8-round on-block clip, which was pushed directly into the receiver. When the last round was fired, the empty clip was automatically ejected with a distinctive, high-pitched ping. Early critics worried this sound would signal a vulnerable moment to the enemy, but combat experience quickly proved this fear unfounded. In the cacophony of battle, with dozens of M1s firing at once. Isolating the sound of a single reload was impossible. By the time the United States entered World War II in December 1941, Springfield Armory and the newly contracted Winchester Repeating Arms Company had produced roughly 600,000 M1 rifles. By the war's end, this number would skyrocket to over 5.4 million, a testament to one of the most successful military-industrial efforts in history. Every dollar, every man-hour, and every engineering refinement poured into the M1 program was an investment in a decisive advantage that would be paid out in lives saved and battles won. In stark contrast, the Imperial Japanese Army went to war with rifles that were, at their core, refined evolutions of late 19th century designs. The Arisaka Type 38, 1905, and the newer Type 99, 1939, were both robust, reliable, and accurate bolt-action weapons. However, they were shackled by the fundamental limitation of manual operation. The drill for a Japanese soldier was a time-consuming cycle. Aim, fire, unlock the bolt, pull it back to eject, push it forward to chamber a new round, lock the bolt down, reacquire the target, and fire again. This process took critical seconds, seconds in which an American infantryman could be sending multiple rounds his way. Japanese military doctrine had been constructed around these technological constraints for decades. Training emphasized meticulous marksmanship, fire discipline, and the spiritual bond between the soldier and his rifle. Tactics were built on the assumption of a certain slower pace of fire. Banzai charges, often misinterpreted as mere suicidal fervor, were in part a tactical response to this firepower deficit, a desperate attempt to close the distance quickly and force close-quarters combat where their bayonet training might prevail. They were bringing a philosophy of war that prized individual spirit to a fight that would be decided by collective, automated firepower. The strategic landscape of October 1944 set the stage for a dramatic demonstration of this disparity. General Douglas MacArthur was making good on his promise to return to the Philippines. His invasion force for Operation King II, the liberation of Leyte, comprised over 200,000 troops of the U.S. Sixth Army. Opposing them was the Japanese 14th Area Army, some 260,000 strong, under the command of the brilliant General Tomoyuki Yamashita. Yamashita had meticulously planned his defense, studying American tactics and fortifying the islands with intricate positions and interlocking fields of fire. He had calculated for American artillery, air power, and numbers. But he could not fully account for the multiplier effect of the M1 Garand. The mathematical equation of the infantry duel had been irrevocably altered before the first landing craft ever hit the sand. Every American rifleman was a mobile rapid-fire platform. Every Japanese soldier was bound by the mechanical limitations of a bygone era. The inevitable equation: how firepower reshaped tactics and morale. The limitations of bolt-action warfare had been grimly apparent since the stalemated trenches of the First World War. Military theorists understood that the side that could generate a higher volume of accurate fire would dominate the battlefield. Yet, for decades, tradition, cost, and technical hurdles prevented a widespread shift. The Japanese Army's relationship with the Arisaka was long and storied, dating back to its success in the Russo-Japanese War. The rifle was indeed the soul of the infantry. Reliable, simple to maintain, and capable of functioning in the harshest environments from the jungles of Southeast Asia to the frozen plains of Manchuria. However, this reliability could not circumvent the physics of the bolt action. A Japanese soldier's maximum effective rate of fire was a theoretical 15 rounds per minute. In the reality of combat, with the fog of war, stress, and the need for movement, this rate was often much lower. Each shot required him to break his sight picture and focus on a manual process, creating windows of vulnerability that accumulated over the course of a firefight. A Japanese rifle squad, relying on its Arisakas, could generate a certain volume of fire, but it was a punctuated, rhythmic volume. American tactical doctrine evolved to exploit the M1's continuous output. They developed marching fire, a tactic where advancing infantry would lay down a constant, suppressing hail of bullets as they moved forward, something impossible with bolt actions. This was not just physically overwhelming, but psychologically shattering for defenders. Japanese intelligence reports from earlier campaigns, later captured and translated, reveal a deep and growing alarm. Officers wrote of American infantry maintaining continuous fire and noted that their own soldiers, no matter how brave or well-trained, could not compete. One report lamented that traditional fire superiority calculations no longer apply. The psychological impact was as critical as the tactical one. The Bushido Code, emphasizing spiritual strength and fearless aggression, was central to the Japanese fighting spirit. Yet courage was meaningless against an invisible wall of lead. A heroic charge that might have succeeded in 1905 was now suicide. The very foundations of Japanese military morale were being systematically dismantled by American industrial ingenuity. The Japanese High Command was aware of the problem but powerless to solve it on a meaningful scale. Their industrial capacity was already stretched to its limit by the demands of the Navy and Air Force. While they had developed a semi-automatic rifle of their own, the Type 4, it entered production far too late and in minuscule numbers. The vast majority of Japan's soldiers would fight and die with the bolt-action rifles they had started with. The aftermath of the Lady Landings and the broader Philippines campaign provided grim statistics to underscore this technological chasm. American forces, leveraging their firepower advantage in countless engagements, inflicted casualties at a rate 3 to 5 times higher than they suffered. The M1 Garand did not just win individual firefights, it reshaped the entire strategic calculus. When planning for the eventual invasion of Japan's home islands, Operation Downfall, American war planners calculated that a division equipped with M1s had the combat effectiveness of 1.5 to 2 divisions with older weapons. The legacy of the M1 Garand extends far beyond World War II. It served with distinction in Korea and set the standard for the next generation of infantry weapons, directly influencing the design of the M14 and, by extension, the philosophy behind modern assault rifles. It proved that in the industrial age, victory increasingly belonged to the nation that could not only innovate but also produce and field that innovation on a massive scale. The ping of the ejected clip is more than a nostalgic sound effect. It is the echo of a revolution, a reminder that on the battlefields of the Pacific, the relentless, mechanical pace of American firepower wrote a decisive and devastating final chapter to a way of war that time had passed by. The relentless advance of American forces through the Philippine archipelago following the Leyte landings became a brutal, rolling demonstration of the M1 Garand's transformative impact. The initial firefight on Red Beach was not an isolated incident but a template for thousands of subsequent engagements across Luzon, Mindanao, and the Visayan Islands. The jungle, which the Japanese had hoped would neutralize American technological advantages, often became a killing ground where the M1's rapid-fire capability proved even more decisive. In the dense, visibility-limiting foliage, engagements often occurred at extremely close ranges, 50 yards or less. In these sudden, violent encounters, the soldier who could get the most rounds downrange the fastest was almost always the one who survived. A Japanese soldier with an Arisaka had time for, at most, one carefully aimed shot before the American opposition responded with a devastating volley of 8 to 10 rounds from a single fire team. The concept of aimed fire itself evolved for the Americans. It became less about a single, perfect shot and more about placing a rapid, suppressing cluster of rounds into a patch of jungle or a firing port in a bunker. This volume of accurate fire was a tactical paradigm that Japanese doctrine centered on the single, disciplined shot was ill-equipped to counter. The weapon's reliability under abysmal conditions became the stuff of legend. While the Arisaka was also renowned for its robustness, the M1's complex gas system continued to function in environments that crippled other semi-automatic designs. Soldiers' accounts describe firing thousands of rounds with minimal cleaning, the rifles caked in mud, soaked by torrential rains, or gritted with sand, yet they continued to cycle. This durability was a direct result of Garand's decade of painstaking testing and refinement. The long-stroke gas piston system, with its operating rod and rotating bolt, had been engineered with generous tolerances where it mattered, preventing the jams and malfunctions that had plagued earlier semi-automatic rifles. This meant that the American firepower advantage was not a fair-weather phenomenon. It was a constant, oppressive reality for the Japanese defenders in monsoon season and dry season alike. The psychological warfare waged by the M1's report cannot be overstated. For the American GI, the rifle was a profound source of confidence. He knew he carried a weapon that gave him a decisive edge in almost any conceivable infantry encounter. This confidence bred aggression and initiative at the small unit level. Squad leaders and even individual privates were empowered to maneuver and assault positions, knowing they could generate their own suppressive fire. This stood in stark contrast to the experience of the Japanese infantrymen, who increasingly felt like a hunted relic. The constant, hammering sound of semi-automatic fire, a sound that never seemed to cease, eroded morale and created a sense of technological helplessness. No amount of martial spirit could stop the 8-round clip fired from 300 yards away. This firepower disparity forced the Japanese to abandon conventional tactics entirely in many sectors. The elaborate, pre-sighted defensive positions and planned counterattacks that formed the core of their doctrine became death traps. Instead, they were driven deeper into a strategy of static defense from fortified caves and bunkers, hoping to draw the Americans into costly, close-range assaults. Yet, even here, the M1 altered the calculus. American clearing teams developed highly effective methods where one soldier would provide rapid suppressive fire into a cave entrance or bunker slit, pinning down the defenders, while his buddies flanked the position with grenades and demolitions. The sustained rate of fire made such dangerous, precise work possible. The industrial might behind the M1 Garand became a strategic weapon in itself. While Japanese industry struggled to produce even basic supplies for its isolated garrisons, American supply ships disgorged a seemingly endless river of ordnance. Crates of .30-06 ammunition and packaged en-bloc clips stacked up on the beaches, ensuring that every rifleman could fire with near impunity. This logistical reality allowed American commanders to employ tactics that would have been prohibitively wasteful for any other army in the world. They could lay down hours of preparatory fire with rifles alone before an assault, softening up positions and further demoralizing the enemy. The Japanese, critically short of everything from artillery shells to rifle ammunition, could only watch and endure. By the time the Philippines were largely secured in the summer of 1945, the verdict was incontrovertible. The M1 Garand had not merely been a useful tool, it had been a campaign-winning weapon. It had saved countless American lives by overwhelming the enemy before they could effectively respond. It had allowed smaller American units to engage and destroy larger Japanese formations. It had broken the spirit of a formidable and disciplined army. The lessons learned in the Philippine jungles resonated all the way to the planning rooms for the invasion of Japan and echoed into the post-war world, cementing the semi-automatic rifle as the unchallenged standard for the modern infantryman. The ping that echoed across those islands was the sound of one era of warfare ending and another, more lethal and efficient one, beginning. The echoes of the M1 Garand's report had not yet faded in the Pacific when the weapon faced a new, brutal test in the frozen hills of Korea. The conflict proved that the technological leap it represented was not a temporary advantage, but a permanent transformation of infantry combat. Facing North Korean and Chinese forces armed primarily with the bolt-action Mosin Nagant and the occasional submachine gun, the M1 once again gave American and UN troops a decisive edge. In the desperate, close-quarter fighting of the Pusan perimeter, the rapid, accurate fire of the Garand was often the thin line that held positions against human wave attacks. The Korean winter presented a challenge that even the Pacific's jungles had not: extreme cold that could freeze lubricants and seize mechanisms. Yet the M1's robust design proved equal to the task. Veterans of both wars often remark that while their feet were freezing and their rations scant, their rifle would always fire. This reliability in the face of a new environmental extreme further cemented its legendary status. The Garand was also pitted against the new generation of Soviet-designed infantry weapons, like the SKS carbine and the iconic AK-47. While these weapons offered the game-changing capability of full automatic fire, they often sacrificed accuracy and effective range. In the open, mountainous terrain of Korea, the M1's power and precision at medium to long ranges often trumped the spray and pray tactics of opponents armed with less accurate automatic weapons. The Garand was proving that the principles of reliable, aimed, rapid fire were timeless. The weapon's legacy was now secure, but its operational life was gradually drawing to a close. The very revolution it had started was beginning to render it obsolete. The M1 Garand, for all its brilliance, was a product of its time. It was heavy, long, and fired a full-power rifle cartridge that generated significant recoil, making it difficult to control in fully automatic fire, a capability increasingly demanded by modern military doctrine. The en-bloc clip system, while efficient, was less flexible than the detachable box magazines starting to appear on new rifle designs. Its own direct descendant, the M14 rifle, was essentially an attempt to modernize the Garand. Adopted in 1957, the M14 incorporated a detachable 20-round magazine and selective fire capability, but it retained the powerful 7.62 51mm NATO cartridge, a derivative of the 3006, and much of the M1's core design. In many ways, the M14 was the Garand's final powerful form. However, the lessons of close-quarters combat in jungles and urban settings, already glimpsed in the Pacific and Korea, were becoming the primary focus. The U.S. military's shift to the smaller, lighter, lower recoil, 5.56 45mm cartridge, with the introduction of the M16 rifle, marked the true end of the Garand's era. The age of the high-powered, semi-automatic battle rifle was giving way to the age of the assault rifle. Yet, to say the M1 Garand was retired would be a profound misstatement. It was transformed. It left the realm of standard-issue military hardware and entered the pantheon of American history and culture. For the millions of Garand-toting GIs who carried it, the rifle was not just a weapon. It was a part of their identity, their lifeline, and the physical embodiment of their service. In the decades that followed, it became a cherished heirloom, a prized collector's item, and a living artifact. The greatest generation revered it, and subsequent generations of historians, shooting enthusiasts, and patriots sought it out. The Civilian Marksmanship Program, CMP, a legacy of the early 20th century, became the primary conduit for these historic rifles to find their way into the hands of civilian owners. This ensured that the M1 would not be confined to museum glass cases, but would continue to be used, appreciated, and understood. On shooting ranges across America, the distinctive ping still rings out, a tangible connection to a defining period in world history. The M1 Garand's ultimate impact is measured on two scales. Tactically and strategically, it was a weapon that won battles and saved lives. It provided a quantifiable, overwhelming advantage that dictated the outcome of countless engagements and shaped the very tactics of the mid-20th century. It forced every military on Earth to recognize that the future of infantry combat was semi-automatic. But its deeper, more enduring legacy is symbolic. The M1 Garand stands as a powerful testament to a unique fusion of American qualities: the genius of the individual inventor, John Garand, the power of industrial mass production, and the courage of the common soldier. It was not a weapon designed for an elite guard. It was built to be issued by the millions to citizen soldiers, and it empowered them to achieve victory. It represents a time when American industrial might was harnessed to produce tools of unparalleled quality and effectiveness, not just for profit, but for the preservation of freedom. In its polished wood and blued steel, we see the embodiment of the arsenal of democracy. The M1 Garand was more than a battle implement. It was, and remains, an icon of American resolve, ingenuity, and the immense cost of liberty. Its story, from the drawing boards of Springfield to the beaches of Leyte and the hills of Korea, is forever woven into the fabric of the nation it helped to defend.